Coming to you from the Oddball Podcast Studios in New York City. My name is Vin Forte, and you're listening to Oddball with Vin Forte. Go follow the show over on Twitter at Oddball Podcast. Follow me on Twitter at MightyVin. Follow me over on Instagram at VinForteNYC. Follow the podcast. If you're only listening to it, there's a new video element over on YouTube. I don't know why I'm saying it like that. It's a video. It's a video element. It's like people say content. We're putting content out there. We're putting a podcast out there. Putting video out there with guests, good guests, solid guests. Last episode, I had Rob Parker on from Fox Sports. Martenzie Johnson from Andscape and ESPN. Good friend of mine, comes on once a month. We got another beautiful person from Andscape. I don't know why I'm using the word beautiful. Whatever. He's a beautiful man. I'll say it. Mr. Justin Tinsley is on the pod today. He's got a book out. It was All a Dream. It's the Biggie Smalls book. You've seen it. You've absolutely seen it around. We will show it off in just a moment. But I'm just gonna jump right into it. Let's get him in here. Nope, that's not it. There you are.
There we are.
There you are, Justin. How are you?
I'm good, man. Beautiful. That's a great way. I'll take that to heart. Thank you. I'll gladly take that.
But I wanted to definitely start things off with the book.
Yeah.
Because one of I'll say one of the beautiful things about the book is the fact that it's not just a biography of Biggie. There have been a lot of biographies of Biggie done, some more haphazard than others, some focusing on different points of his life. But you really took a great approach to it, which is you really go in on the time that Biggie was alive and when he came up, which is what I love that kind of stuff, because you can tell the story of anyone, but if it doesn't have the context of what was going on around them, you lose so much. It's like if you're just talking to your friend about an event that happened. Like, yeah, they're going to get the gist of it, but if they weren't there, if they don't know the feeling and the vibe, like, what good does it do?
No, absolutely, man. Like, I think that was my biggest, I don't want to say hold up in the entire process, but I really wanted to nail how I was going to position Big within the scope of the world that he grew up around. Hence the actual title of the book, And my wife, she pulled me aside one day. She was like, "Why don't you just do what you like always do in your stories? Like, give it like the historical context that it deserves." And literally, when she said that sentence, it was like a light popped on in my head. I was like, "Oh yeah, like I'm going to write about Big, but like if he's grown up in Brooklyn, New York in the late 1970s, early 1980s, well, what was New York City like in the late 1970s and early 1980s? And like, what are some of these things that were going on that Biggie more than likely probably didn't even pay that much attention to over the course of his life, just because it's just the time he grew up in. These were the things he was used to seeing, used to hearing, used to feeling. So I thought if I could do that in a deep, meaningful way, from even before Biggie was born and even till after he unfortunately lost his life, I knew if I could do that throughout the book, I would have something different that I hadn't seen anybody else do with respect to Biggie Smalls.
Now, in doing your research for the book, was there anything that caught you off guard about researching that time? Because we're roughly around the same age. You're a little older. We remember that time, especially me growing up in New York City. But, a lot of people like to say, "Oh, yeah, I remember that time." What, when you were 9? Okay, it was like, yeah, you were discovering music. We were all discovering things, but it wasn't like being a 27-year-old,
for
back
sure.
in 1992. So, like, was there anything that caught you off guard that you didn't expect to find out?
Yeah, and one of them I focus on in the book. It was around the time of Big's first album, Ready to Die, which came out in September 1994. It actually came out on September 13th, 1994. One, that's literally 2 years to the day that Tupac Shakur lost his life, which is nothing but sheer coincidence. But two, and this is something I didn't know, literally the same day, September 13th, 1994, was when the 1994 crime bill was signed into law. And I knew, researching that 94 crime bill, researching Ready to Die, and really listening to what Biggie was saying, the pictures he was trying to paint of the environment around him, I just thought linking those two like mammoth bodies of work in in American history for completely different reasons. But I felt like if you could position the album within scope of the crime bill, the album is kind of like the response to the crime bill. It's like, yeah, you're calling us these things, you're calling us that, but here's the actual reality that we have to grow up in.
Well, now for people who may not know what was or what was the importance of that crime bill, because that's one of those things that comes up that um, you're either paying attention to and you remember or you've heard
Hmm.
of, or it's one of those things that not for you, but certainly speaking for myself, in white circles, there's a lot of news stories that are out there that don't necessarily get picked up by a lot of white folks because they sort of pull this card of like, oh, nothing that the government does affects us. Like who,
Right.
it's like when people talk about the president, like a lot of white people, like people in my own family will go, oh well, it doesn't even matter who gets elected in because nothing affects us. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, yes and yes. Like yes, it doesn't affect you, but it also doesn't affect you because like you're not black or you're
Yeah.
not poor. Like so, the '94 crime bill I think is one of those things that could go completely over someone's head if they're in a different situation.
Yeah, the 94 crime bill was just when we look at the criminal justice system in America, especially over the last, let's just say 30 years, because that's a nice round number. It's almost 2024, which would be the 30th anniversary of that bill. When we look at the criminal justice system, when we look at, the prison rates, the way that they are in America, a lot of it can be traced back to that crime bill. Like I guess uh, the verbiage that a lot of people would associate with that bill is the term super predators, which were, it was the law, the bill was signed into law um, because of the enormous crime rates in America. There was a lot of crime in America going on. There's no fact, there's no debate about that. But also with this 94 crime bill, if you remember, the Democrats were in power, and for a long period of time the Republicans ran on the scope of like Democrats are basically just going to be the downfall of the moral fabric of society. They're going to let violence run the streets, X, Y, and Z. So this bill is remembered for the harsh penalties that it put into place on uh, these communities that were largely black and brown, these communities that were largely impacted by drug use, drug selling, violent crime, disinvestment, lack of resources, X, Y, and Z. So when you listen to the album Ready to Die, it's such a powerful, maybe in some ways unintentional rebuttal to everything that a lot of the headlines showed back in 1993, 1994, up until this bill was signed, and why it was necessary.
Well, yeah, especially because he's only rapping about what's around him.
Yeah, yeah.
So, like, I think that's part of the context too. Is that we go back and we listen to a lot of these albums now, and they're cased in amber, but
Mhm.
they're cased in amber because they're a snapshot. Like, rap is a
Yeah,
constant conversation. Like when
for
people
sure.
go, like one of the points that a lot of people try and bring up that I don't necessarily like is that when people talk about rap, sometimes they go, "Oh, every album has a shelf life," because the references that like it's gonna grow
Mhm.
old or like. It's like I don't think that's true. I think we're
No, I don't think
smart
that's true
enough.
either.
Yeah, I think we're smart enough. We're savvy enough. We've got tools now. We've got the internet. Like you can look
Mhm.
up anything now.
Yeah.
So if there's something that sparks your interest, or you hear something in a rap that um, you don't understand, it's not like 20 years ago where
Right.
it's like, well, how am I going to find out what this is? What are they talking about? It's like, no, you'll find out what they were talking about, and you'll get a better appreciation of it.
Yeah, man, these are like time capsules. Like if you ever want to know what was people's mind state in 1997, shortly after, rap is reeling from the deaths of Tupac and the Notorious BIG. You want to hear about issues that are going on in America within their neighborhoods in 1997. Like you can always go back and listen to it. And I think to just pardon those albums as, oh, they're just relics of the past, they don't matter anymore. That's a complete and utter disrespectful view of hip hop and how it's changed the world, because you should want to hear what people were basically knocking down doors to say whenever they said them, because this is part of our history. You can't just look at it like, it happened in the past, it doesn't matter anymore. Like, no, it matters even more now. It definitely matters even more now. So I agree with you. I definitely don't think every album has a shelf life.
Well, then that brings up an interesting conversation that's going on within hip hop right now, where a lot of the newer artists are sort of rebelling against the past and going like, well, we don't need to know the history. We're charting our
Yeah,
own path. We're doing it. And in some ways, there is, I do kind of respect that to a degree where it's like, I'm going to chart my own path.
for
But
sure.
then there is that other side of it where it's like, there are lessons to be learned from the past as well. Like, I think
Yeah.
you need to take at least sort of like a cursory look back at what came before.
I mean, it's like this conversation could go on for hours, right? Like
Right.
there's so many like nuances and complexities to it. But when I think about that, like you said, I understand wanting to chart your own path, wanting to be your own man, be your own woman. Like you want to be able to say you did it your way. Like there's still a value of being Frank Sinatra saying I did it my way. Like there's still a value in that. But also, you have to be willing to know where you came from, or where the genre came from, or what these artists had to deal with, what doors were they knocking down so you could walk through them. And honestly, you have to care about the past, because eventually one day you'll be the past, and you want people to go back and look at the work that you did and be like, you know what, this person really, you know stood 10 toes down on this issue, and I really like how they address these issues within their music, and I'd love to go back to them. You want people to be able to talk about you like that, not like, oh well, you know, Justin isn't writing as much in the year, whatever the case may be, whatever he did in 2022, 2023, it doesn't matter anymore. Like, no, I'm not, you're not doing this work for it not to matter. At least, or
Well,
at least you shouldn't be.
right. And then on the flip side, we're seeing now the maturation of hip hop, where
Yeah.
I always think back to the 80s and then in the, big acts in the 80s that then couldn't transition into the 90s because the style had changed and they just weren't that thing. Were seen as like old men. Like Run
Yeah.
DMC who put out an album like 92, like, he's old timers. Like 28 years old.
Yeah. Yeah.
Meanwhile, now we're starting to see people, I think the script has kind of changed a little bit
Hmm.
where there's a deeper respect now. As much as there might not be in some circles a deep respect for people in the past, like in another way, I think we give the people in our generation who came up when we were younger a deep amount of respect because we see like the ghost face of the world, like Jay-Z. Like
Yeah.
Jay-Z just turned 50 a couple of years ago, like, and he's
Yeah.
still making albums, still making like 444. Like that was a critically acclaimed album,
Yeah, for sure.
and that
And I
never would have happened if he was like in the 80s to the 90s.
No, but I think it was one of those things where these artists who, we always latched ourselves onto, like you said, the ghost faces of the world, you know what I mean? Like we remember them. They were at the beginning for a lot of people, especially in our generation, Vin. Like we remember being young, listening to Wu-Tang. Like our cousins put us on Wu-Tang, and you trying to learn all the members of Wu-Tang, and then you start to decipher between who is who and who makes the
Right?
style of
Who's
music that you
important?
like the
Like,
best.
should I be
Yeah.
listening to mathematics? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. So you grow up with these artists. And the thing is, it's kind of like, oh, well, if I'm gonna start dishing these artists to the side because they're older, it's like, wait a minute, they just a little bit older than I am. You know what I mean? And so it's like there's always gonna be that emotional connection for a large part of hip hop fans to these older acts, because the same way you've watched them grow in their music, they've basically grown with you. They dictate different chapters and parts of your life that are always going to bring you back there one way or the other. So like, yeah, that definitely couldn't have happened in the 80s or the 90s. I think, just mind states were different then, and what we viewed as valuable was different then. And so I'm glad to see, acts in their 40s and some going into their 50s still doing it, because like you can tell it still brings them joy, or at least you hope it does.
Yeah, like, but there are. I mean, let's face it, there are some goofy opinions going around thanks to
Oh
social
yeah,
media.
yeah.
Like, I don't know how many times I've had to mute some rando who's been like, Outcast was never good until Hey Ya. Like, they just had that
Oh
one
yeah,
big
no,
hit.
no,
It's like,
no.
Get
Nah,
out of here. What are you talking about?
nah, you can't even engage in conversations like that. Like that, though, that's just shock value trying to get you to respond. Like, no way. Like, for one, you were like 2 when Hey Ya came out. Like,
Right,
so
right. It's like some 14-year-old on
yeah,
Twitter, like, I
exactly.
don't know what's the
Yeah,
big
no, for
deal.
sure. You got
I
to avoid
listened to
those
that
type.
one album, Idlewild, and I just didn't get it. It's
Yeah,
like, well,
exactly. Like, yeah, who are these guys? But yeah, I've learned that you can't engage on those type of arguments in social media or those type of discussions. I try to curate my discussions and responses as much as I can because yeah, if you start trying to respond to those outcasts was never good to hey guys, like you will drive yourself up that wall that I'm looking at right now. Like you will literally drive yourself crazy.
yeah, and it's all over. Like I see it in basketball spaces on
Oh
Twitter.
God.
It's huge in I don't know if you're a fellow wrestling fan, but
Yeah,
it's
I used to be really big. Obviously, I still follow it. I know who the names are. I couldn't tell you
yeah,
all the storylines and stuff, but like, go ahead. Go
but
ahead with
it's
the
big and
analogy.
it's there's a lot of dumb arguments going on there because with wrestling, people like the behind the scenes stuff because it's all
Yeah,
kayfabe. So you get into these dumb arguments where people are like, "Oh, well, I think this is going to happen on Monday Night Raw. Well, I think this is going to happen on Monday," and then it changes at the last second because card is always subject to change, and you're always going to have one side that's like, "I told you this was going to happen. CM Punk was going to come back and do this."
yeah,
Blah blah. It's like just watch the show. Can we just watch? You would never do this
yeah.
with you wouldn't do this with Game of Thrones. You wouldn't be like, well, I think that this actor is going to come back and do that. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
no, you
Yeah.
would just watch it and just watch it. Go outside.
I
Take care of your
remember.
family.
No, that's great. So like they try to predict like what's going to happen on the next show or the next 2 shows because
Not even that,
like
or they'll get into like the finances or the ratings, where it's
oh
like,
man, geez
where,
Louise, no way. Yeah,
yeah.
what are
Me and
we really
Martenzi,
debating?
yeah, me and
Yeah,
Martenzi have these conversations a lot because he's a big wrestling guy
yeah.
too,
He sure
and
is. He sure is.
yeah, and it's just like we both laugh at these people on social media. It's like, well, WWE was up against AEW this week, and they did 900,000 viewers. This company only did 600,000 viewers. It's like, did you like the show?
Right. Yeah. Like
Did you
what are we
like
talking
it?
about?
Like, what do we even? Yeah.
Oh, oh no, that would annoy the hell out of me. Like, like, what are you talking about? I can't control ratings. Neither can you.
Yeah, I've never had a Nielsen box in my life.
Yeah, man. Sorry about that. Yeah. But no, that sounds annoying.
Well, almost as annoying as the people. Nice little segue. Who are trying to get in everyone's heads on Deion Sanders, and this has been going on for all season now.
Hmm.
But I feel like there's a million ways you could take the whole Deion situation. But I feel like it's coming to a head this week because now they've been losing. This is a particularly bad loss to Stanford,
Yep, I agree.
and and so now you've got like I think several things can be true at once, but people in some circles are only going to focus in on one of these. And the things that I think are true at once is that Deion is still a good coach. That these losses don't necessarily reflect, even though the buck stops with him because he's the head coach. You could tell in his press conferences and the way he handles his business that he really wants these kids to succeed, and he's really putting his best foot forward. You could tell he's being very humble. He's being very transparent. He puts everything online for you to see. With that said, I think there is another side to it where the players need to be more disciplined. You see it, 17 plus penalties. Shador in the middle of the game during halftime plugging merch on social media. Like that's stuff you can't in order to sort of have the right to brag and flex a little bit, you've got to win the games. But I think people are only there's going to be a segment of people that only focus on the flash and the prime time of it all, and they're going to go, well, see, I told you this is why they're is their downfall now. Pride cometh before a fall. And it's like, no, it's not. Deion earned the right to be braggadocious. He already put in the work. He was humble. I mean, he was prime time, but he was humble during his day in that he made sure to put in the work and make sure that he got the job done. So I think people are only going to start focusing on that now. unless they start winning a couple more games. Then the narrative will flip again because that's just how it goes.
No, I agree. I mean, this is just it's the product of the times that we live in and the discussions that really move metrics or whatnot. I know we were just talking about numbers, but like uh yeah, this is just a product of the nature of the beast, man. Um, when they came out with that first win versus TCU, and then they started 3-0, there was so much energy, so much momentum, and there was so much excitement. But as you said, you also know there was a flip side to that coin. You knew there was like, soon as they lose that first game, like you said, it was going to be a "see, I told you so" moment. It's like nobody predicted these guys were going to go undefeated and be in the college football playoff
Right,
conversation.
they won one game
They
last
won one
season.
game last year, and like you when so when you have weeks like the Oregon, when you have weeks like USC, and then you have weeks like again this past weekend versus Stanford, yeah, those losses are going to be highlighted because the wins were such like cultural wins shifting, so much about college football. But yeah, I don't think these losses are an indictment on Deion as a coach. But I do want to bring something to light to what you said, and Deion talks about this all the time in these videos that we see, good, bad, or indifferent. Like he's holding these players accountable. He's saying if you want to be great, you have to show up to practice. You got to show up to class. Like I can only do but so much. I can't want this more than you want it, and then you want it for yourself. So these guys have to understand that, like, you know, you're you think, yes, you want to promote yourself, but as you said, you got to keep the main thing the main thing. You got to keep football on football, and then all these other, branding and imaging opportunities, you'll get those, they'll come. So yeah, I agree. Like I don't think Dion needs to. I don't think this is an indictment on Dion. I think this is a reality of being a Power Five football coach. You're gonna have your ups, you're gonna have your downs, but Dion knows that like this isn't the team that's gonna get me over the top, but this is the team that has started the conversation around what I'm trying to do at Colorado. But yeah, they have to be more disciplined, and they have to keep the main thing. At least from what I'm seeing on the outside looking in.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think they're going to be able to. I would not be shocked if they start using these losses as momentum. Like you even saw it last week
Yeah,
when Deion was like, "If you're going to get us, come get us now," because this ain't going to happen. Later on in the season, next season. Like
yeah,
if you're going to beat us, now's the time.
yeah.
I think
No,
he's
for sure.
100% right. He said, like, look, we're sick. He said, what, we're 7 or 8 guys away from
Hmm.
being a real powerhouse. So
Yeah.
he knows what's up. I think it's just the media and I mean, I hate even using that term, the media, because it's very nebulous. But like,
Right. No.
the people out there that are hating on Dion, um, they just have this narrative that like, oh, well, we're always waiting for the ever shoe to drop, and you know, it's going to be nothing short of a disaster if they go anything less than like 12-2 or something. It's like,
Yeah.
and like you said, no, like they what this is a reclamation project. Let's not
Mhm.
forget what this started out as. He came from Jackson State, where he had a lot of success,
Yep.
but it's not the Power Five. Like it's just not.
Right.
And he comes into Colorado, and look, he's made a big splash so far, and you had all the celebrities and all the flash, and now that he's
Mhm.
lost a couple games, that's going to go down a little bit. And you know what? Now's the perfect time to use that as fuel. Like, look,
Yeah.
you want all the extra stuff to come back. This is a good lesson. Like, you've got to
Yeah.
perform. You got to win.
Exactly. Nobody's gonna come to see a 3-17.
Yeah,
Like, so like how bad do you want it? Like what is your motivation? So I think we're gonna learn a lot about this Colorado team over the next month of the season. They already have 4 wins. You think about it, if they get 2 more wins, they're technically bowl eligible, which,
yeah.
going 1-11 the previous season, that's unheard of. Unheard of. But it'll be interesting to see how Dion rallies this team in the midst of, a pretty uncomfortable skid. But we'll see. But this is all part of the job. This is all part of the story. So if it's anything about Dion, it won't be quiet though.
No, no, God, no.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't want it any other way. Like that's why
Me neither. No,
that's
no,
why you
no,
watch
not
Dion.
absolutely.
But I want to switch gears completely right now for a couple articles that you guys have been writing over on Andscape.
Hmm.
Part of a series, you wrote one. David Dennis Jr. wrote another one about how hold on, my camera's out, but it doesn't matter. You can still hear me though, right?
Yep, loud and clear.
Okay, so I'll just get the question out there while we're fixing that.
All right.
So, like I was saying, you and David Dennis Jr. Contribute articles to this series about debt and how debt impacts specifically the Black community and specifically the topic of student loans has
Yeah.
been a big part of that. And the attitude towards student loans now and loans in general and the idea of borrowing money and making sure you have enough money, which is more what you were talking about in your article that you wrote. It can be a dicey prospect. And you mentioned in the article that you wrote that it sent you to the hospital once.
Yeah.
Because of just the stress. And that's something that people don't really talk about is that when you have money hanging over you, it's the worst. It really is the worst because it's just like a sword of Damocles just over your head 24/7 because you can't be comfortable until you know that debt is paid off. But then to David Dennis Jr.'s point with the student loans, it's like, how do you know when that's never going to get paid off? So like he's got the attitude of, well, should we all just accept that this is a blank check that we're writing at a certain point, to get into college so that we can get the opportunities and specifically in the Black community that they can get the opportunities that they need. And then just sort of treat it like, oh, well, this is just a forever bill that I have that I can defer occasionally and maybe pay down. Because, this past month, the moratorium on paying the student loan debts has rescinded. So now people have to get back to paying it, and there's gonna be a big bubble bursting soon.
Yeah, no, my wife just made she just made her first student loan payment today. She was like, "Yep, first one. This is the first one in about what 3.5 years." And so now, this is part of like what my article talked about. Like my wife and I, we talk about it all the time, just finances. Like I stress out about money in ways that obviously, as you just mentioned, I sent myself to the hospital one time stressing over money. And it's something that I'm working on, desperately every day to, for the, just for my health, because as you said it in your question right here, it's like, yo, that is something that hangs over your head 24/7, 365. And it's just like, all right, well, how much have I paid down on this? How much more do I have to do? And then like, where can I get to live the life that I want to live and be comfortable doing it? And these are just questions that float through my head all the time. So when I wrote that story, it was from the perspective of being, a new husband, a new father, and just wanting to make sure I'm taking care of my family at all times. Like I love my job. I'm making, I'm I'm bringing my end to the family. You know what I mean? Keeping my family afloat. Obviously, my wife and I, we both have full-time jobs, and this is just I tell her all the time, like we're doing this life thing. We're doing it together. We're figuring it out, and it's on me to make sure I'm being as level-headed and as realistic about money issues, or money opportunities, money questions, money answers that I have. Like we need to be as open as possible on this because we know this is a lifetime conversation, just as a married couple, as parents. So but the totality of it all, it could be so daunting at times. It's like, man, how are we ever going to pay this down? How are we going to do that? And then when you think about student loan payments coming back in after 3.5 years off, you're like, okay, well, where, how do I move things around to make sure that we're still comfortable? How does she move things around to make sure that we're still comfortable? These are ongoing questions that we have day in and day out. And I just wanted to be as transparent as I could in that piece.
Well, and there's always stuff that's slipping through the cracks too. I think that's
Yeah, for
important
sure.
to let people know that they're not alone in
Hmm.
that. Like, I know for me, like look, my family is a lot of them are little, let's just say a little more well-to-do than I am.
No, I got you.
Yeah, like so, like every once in a while, like if I'm at like an event or something, they'll be like, "Oh, yeah," they'll start talking about money, which is like, don't talk about money at a family event. But that's
Yeah.
beside the point. But the question will come up like, "Oh, you're putting money in your 401k, are you?" It's like, What? I wasn't even. Do, does, you can do that? Like, I could put money away?
Yeah.
I can make a savings? It's like, no, I can't. Like, I think most people, if you ask them right now, like, hey, can you put a good amount of money away every month for a 401k or for savings later in life? That person is very
Yeah.
lucky if they can say yes.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it doesn't mean that you're bad at money. It doesn't mean that you're
No, no, not at
it's
all.
it's just that there's so many different parts of this conversation that have to go into it. Like, yeah, like money is a big stressor because you understand it. Like it shouldn't be, and it really shouldn't be like this, but you understand that like so much of what you want to provide and the opportunities you want to present to your family that there is only possible with money. And we're not, thank God, like we're definitely doing okay for
Yeah.
ourselves as a family. But these are always things that I'm thinking about moving forward. It's like, okay, well, what's the next level up? What's the next play to make sure that I'm doing my part to bring something to the household as well. So these are just questions and ideas and thoughts that just run through my mind on a daily basis, far, far away from, what I do for ESPN and things like that. These are just like real life thoughts.
Yeah, and speaking of ESPN, although I guess this wasn't ESPN, this was Showtime. One of the first places I remember seeing you pop up in was you have a small talking head role in the "Shut Up and Dribble"
Oh yeah, yeah, yep.
documentary,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, I think back to those comments by I think it was Laura Ingraham on Fox News
Oh
that
yeah.
sparked the
Mm-hmm.
whole thing, and you know, the question I would pose, and I don't know if you have the answer to it. I don't know if anyone has the answer to this, but has the country's temperature changed on that, or has it remained pretty divided? Like, because I think it's still pretty split down the middle, and I
Yeah.
think there's no secret to it because for as much as people will yell at LeBron James for using his influence to speak out on certain things, or Steph Curry or whomever else,
Yeah.
all of a sudden, when it's some white country star speaking out, or a white baseball player, oh, Kurt Schilling should get to say. Why are people getting upset at Kurt Schilling? He has every right to say what he has to say. It's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
okay, well, why not keep the same energy with LeBron?
Yeah.
And it's like we know
No.
why.
Mm-hmm. I think in 2023, it's more we're more accustomed to seeing athletes use their voices and do things of that nature. But just because we're used to we've grown more accustomed to it, and it's more part of the fabric of society now than maybe it was maybe a generation or two ago. um that still doesn't mean a lot of people have like the switch is hit for them, like, I get it now. Yes, they should be able to do that, they should be able to do this. No, I still think there's probably just as many, if not more, people that feel the opposite way of what I'm saying right now, just because of where discussions have gone in this country, where how issues are presented and how they're covered within the country. So it feels like at times definitely we're more divided than we've ever been. And that's not me giving, I'm this the official temperature of America by
Right,
any
right.
stretch of the imagination. It's just from conversations I have, the things that I read, and I try to keep up with it as much as possible. But no, to answer your question, I think we're more accustomed to seeing athletes use their platform and their voices to speak out on issues, which I think largely is a great thing. But I'm not so sure where America itself is on athletes, particularly black athletes, wielding such a influential display of power.
Yeah, because it is interesting that we do see it more than ever. Um, which I guess someone could make the argument that dilutes the power of it,
Hmm.
because back in the day, like when you only had four channels on TV
Yeah.
and you could only get access to your local newspaper, and you know Muhammad Ali's taking a stand, it's like, oh wow, this is huge.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the context is nobody else was taking a stand at that time. So
Yep.
when he did, like that's why it was a big deal. So do you think there's I say all that to basically say, do you think there's a certain level of ignorance or fatigue with a lot of people right now, where it's like, oh no, rightly or wrongly, like, oh, it's another athlete stand up, and just it sort of dilutes whatever message is trying to get out there.
Yeah, I don't think the more athletes speaking out on issue dilutes it. I think that's what we want them to do, right? Those that feel comfortable enough to do that, that's what we want you to do, is use your platform and use your voice to speak out on these things. Now, like you said, it's just the number of outlets that we have to consume information, whether it be podcasts, whether it be TV shows, whether it be online publications, so on and so forth. There's so many different ways to consume information, to cover information, that uh, I don't think you can have athletes doing it enough, and it will dilute. Now, that may whoever's consuming the information may feel a certain way about it, but I don't think the act of them doing it will dilute it. It's all a matter of how it's covered and how it's presented, and how people digest the news when they get it.
Right. I think that's more what I was trying to get. I don't think the act of them doing it dilutes
Yeah,
it personally, but I think just like people's perception, like the average Joe's working a 9 to 5 comes home and it's just like, I can't get, like, because in news in general,
yeah,
I think you bring up a good point about it's hard to separate what's what we should be focusing on
mm-hmm.
and what's just kind of like fugazi. Like you and I know that if we see a website that's pulling a
Yeah,
story and it's like
yeah,
red, white, and blue eagle news.com, it's like that's
right,
a fugazi website. I'm not
yeah,
going to read
for
that.
sure.
But it's like there's people out there that a lot of older people that are like,
Yes,
oh no, this is where
yes,
I get all my news.
yeah. It was like, wait, what was that site you just told me?
Yeah,
No,
it's like this is
like,
the site that gives
no.
me malware. That's what it is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's again, man, it's so unfortunate. There's so many news outlets, and there's so many news outlets, as you just said, that like it's and the people who are running those, to use your words, fugazi websites, like it's like they're preying on people they know are easily susceptible. And if
Right.
you convince them that something is going on, then you've got them wrapped around your finger, because that's how quickly disinformation spreads. And if you do that, then that you can disrupt the conversation in so many ways. And unfortunately, that's happening. It's like almost, it feels ad nauseum at times.
Do you think the this is the wrong way of saying it, but like the antidote to that is people seeing social action in their personal lives? Because I often think that it's one thing for people to look at a news article and sort of poo poo like whatever social action people are doing. Oh,
Yeah.
people are gonna march for change or whatever. Like these dumb kids think they're gonna burr, burr, burr.
Right.
It's like whatever. But like once it starts to affect you, I always think go back. I always go back to so many stories about like queer folks, gay people,
Hmm.
and how they have these parents that were like, I would never support gay marriage, and then their child, they find out their child is gay or lesbian, and it's
Hmm.
like, oh well, my child's different. Like they're good. They're one of the good ones, and it's like, are they one of the good ones, or like should you change your mind on everyone? And
Right.
you're like learning a big lesson right now.
No, it's like we have to be very, and I guess it is the antidote, as you just said. We have to be very cautious about giving people the power to sway, have these type of voices and have this type of influence. And in some ways, I feel like it's a little bit too late. But yeah, like you said, I think seeing these activist protests or these activist movements in face to face, it can never, I don't think it can hurt, because it'll show you that like these people aren't just quote unquote complaining. These are their lives that they're trying to change, to feel safe within the world, or at least a little bit safer within the world. They're trying to use their voice to speak on this issue, and that should be the most humanistic thing in the world, to want to live peacefully, to not have to worry about disruptions or whatever they may be. I think everybody should see that in person, because that's really all any of these protests are saying. Is like, let us be human, let us live. And when you go to these, when you go to the women's marches, and they're fighting for abortion rights, we should all be fighting for that. Like we should all allow people to be themselves. So I think seeing these protests or being at these moments where the greater, I'm not talking about like January 6th or anything like that. I'm talking about like
Right.
actual protests, actual peaceful protests that are actually, you say, hey, look, Black Lives Matter. Or, hey, look, voting rights, abortion rights, LGBTQ rights, and equality. Like, these people are there because they're trying to make the world a better place, not just for them, but for people and generations long after them. And that's what you should see in person, is like people are literally putting everything on the line to try to make their world and the worlds around people, their loved ones, even an even better place as well.
Well, I think that's a great point because it brings up the idea that of looking at an issue with empathy or without empathy.
Yeah,
And
for
I think a
sure.
lot of people look at a lot of these issues without empathy and just read the headlines and go, okay, well, a great example right now is here where I live, in New York City.
Hmm.
There's a big issue with legal immigrants, sanctuary cities, and where are we going to put all these people? And I think, yeah, when you're looking at that issue on its face, like, that is a legitimate issue. Like, we do need to figure out what to do with these people. We can't just have
Hmm.
a lot of homeless people running around. Like, we need to help them. Um, but at the same time, like, there are groups of people out there that look at this same issue, and instead of going, we need to get these people off the streets and help them, it becomes, we need to force these people out.
Yeah.
Like, they put here where I live in Staten Island, they put a bunch of people in like an old retirement home, and there are people who've been protesting outside of that retirement home at night, shooting flashing lights into the windows to annoy the families that are sleeping, and it's like, these people didn't do anything. Like,
Yeah.
they just want to live. Like, don't, like, if you have an issue of where they should go, we can have that conversation, but because we don't want them just out on the street. But the difference there is, do you want to take them off the street and put them somewhere where they can get help, or where they
Hmm.
can get housing, or whatever, or do you want to just like get them out of here and make the problem go away, like, and just out of sight, out of mind?
Yeah, I mean, man, again, how much time do we have to discuss, issues like that? But and like, man, I feel so many type of ways about that, and I don't want to like to stumble over myself trying to
No,
provide
you
an
don't have
answer
to.
for you.
Yeah.
But like, these are questions that I still think about. When I lived in LA for a year in 2015, and I saw the homelessness problem out there, it just really made me think. But just the laws that are put in place, the policies that are put on desks to become these these bodies of work that just impact our lives in such incredible ways. And I say incredible in good and bad. It just made me think about what needs to change, because like you said, those people didn't ask to be there. Like, everybody has a story. Each one of these people has an individual story, and it all led them to that place. And we need to be more empathetic about people and their experiences within the world. So sorry about that. My dog is running around here like crazy.
No, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I want to keep you too long. I know we're coming up almost on an hour here. Um, I know there's a big Monday Night Football game on right now. Everyone loves the Cowboys.
This is right. Yeah. Everyone loves the Cowboys. You're damn right about that.
But I want to talk a little bit about you and ESPN on Around the Horn, and I want
Hmm.
to end on something a little fun.
Yeah, for sure.
Like I mentioned, our mutual friend Martenzi Johnson
Hmm.
has been on Around the Horn a bunch, and you've been on a lot longer than him now. You've not only have you been on a lot longer, you have had quite a winning streak. You win a lot on Around the Horn, and especially against this wily, crafty
my,
young man here,
my
Tim
guy,
Cowlishaw.
Tim Cowlishaw. Yeah, that is
uh,
my guy.
but our friend Martenzi, he's been on a couple times. He won his first time,
Yeah.
which, okay, you could say maybe beginner's luck, or they were greasing the wheels a little. Hasn't won since, and every time it seems like Tim's on with him, and Tim's got his number. what are like some of the keys to winning around the horn? Because it's always like I know it's always up to Tony Reality's
Yeah.
discretion, but I feel like there's if you watch enough around the horn, you can pick up
Hmm.
on certain things where it's like, oh, he's gonna give like a bunch of points for that.
I think, man, the first person that figures out the next person that figures out the scoring system on around the horn will actually be the very first person. Even Tony himself doesn't really understand it. He just goes off vibes that day. But one thing I can say, and there are people who win far more than I do. I think I'm at like 27 career wins now. I just got my 27th win last week against Tim Calishaw, actually, matter of fact. Um, I think you go into these topics with enough passion, like you actually want to talk about it. You have some stats to support your point, but like when you're in a groove on a topic, like okay, Tony's about to bless me with some points. Like you got the charisma showing, you got the facts to back up whatever it is you're saying. So it's like it's really you can't say a muted word. You cannot say a muted word. But you got to feel the topic as you go in. When Tony, because Tony will egg you on. That's the great thing about it. Like he's a great host, but he's a great hype man as well. Like if you start really getting in your bag, he'll be like, "Okay, Tens, I see you," and start just like hitting you with the
Putting
fire
the
button or
flames
hit
up and yeah.
with the money in the back, and it's just really fun. And honestly, like whenever you get those topics where you can go off like that, like that is to me hands down like the funnest part of the show. Even if I win or if I lose, just to know like, okay, I bodied that and Tony gassed me up the entire way. It's man, I love it. I love that show. So much fun.
Has there ever been a topic that came up where you're just like, oh God, like what am I gonna say? Like you and you just have to kind of wing it because it's like, oh, it's TV, I gotta go for it.
Yeah, but see the cool thing is you know the topics beforehand.
Right.
Like they at least, hey, look, we're gonna talk about this, we're gonna talk about that. There may have been like some tennis stuff a while back that I didn't know, but the cool thing is I can go research it myself. So it's never like they'll surprise you with a topic that you didn't go over earlier in the day. Like you always know what you're talking about. But yeah, there's definitely sports where it's like, okay, I definitely need to do my research on this. So yeah, my fault. My
And
yeah,
no, I heard your phone ringing. I
yeah.
heard it. But um, what do you have coming up next in terms of your projects? Work with ESPN, Andscape. You've most recently come off predicting Usher as the Super Bowl
Yeah.
halftime performer. Like, what's your next? What rabbit are you gonna pull out of the hat next?
Oh man, I keep telling myself by the end of the year, I need to have whatever it is my second book is going to be about. I haven't decided on a topic yet. I definitely have some ideas in mind, but yeah, that's definitely the next big project on my mind. And I've got some ideas, some logs on the fire, but I really can't say what they are yet because
Right.
not all of them have been approved. But I hope to have another series coming up pretty soon, just of written stories about a certain topic. I can't say what it is just yet, just because I don't know if it's going to be approved. But
Yeah.
we're going to try to push that across the finish line.
There we go. Well, Justin, thank you so much for taking some time out. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I love your work with Andscape. You got all you guys over there do some amazing work, and yeah, the book. Everyone go out and get the book. Where's that picture?
Please,
Let me get that
please.
picture up again. Go. Yeah, this thing, this little thing right here.
There we
Go
go.
get it. Go get it. It was just a dream. It was all a dream. This was just a dream. What am I
Nah, it's
saying?
all good, man. You nailed it though. It was all a dream. Biggie in the world that made them. In stores, audiobooks, however you want to devour the book, it's out there.
Yeah. So go get it. And yeah, and like I said, Andscape, Around the Horn, get the book. Follow where are you on social media for people?
You can follow me on Instagram at Justin Tinsley. You can follow me on Twitter or X, whatever it's called, at Justin Tinsley. Uh,
I still hate that. I don't like the notifications
yeah,
because
me
it just
neither.
looks like I've got like a weird porn app. And I'm just getting notifications from my weird porn app.
Right. I never thought about it like that, but now I'll never be able to unsee it. But yeah, those are the two main ones that I use. Instagram and Twitter X.
There we go. Like I said, Justin, thank you for taking some time out. I'm going to put you down for a moment while I just wrap up here. I like that cut him off right at the end. It's like, all right. It's like, get him out of here. But if you want to follow me, support this show, youtube.com/@Oddball Podcast. Listen to the pod wherever you get your podcasts from. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher. Don't do Stitcher. They just went out of business like 3 months ago. You're not going to, podcast won't be there. The service isn't there anymore. Google Play, wherever you get your podcasts from. You know where to get your podcasts from because I'm assuming you're listening to one right now. Otherwise, what are you doing here? Go follow me over on Twitter/X @MightyVin. Follow the podcast for all the updates and clips at Oddball Podcast over on Twitter. And over on Instagram @Vin Forte NYC. I think that's it. So, again, big thanks to Justin Tinsley, Andscape, ESPN, author extraordinary, beautiful man. And with all that said, see you back here, same time, same place next week. This has been Oddball, Vin Forte. My name is Vin Forte. Bye-bye.